A lost ring, a hidden fear, and a love tested by silence. Jimin and Jungkook confront the fragile truth that binds their hearts together. Jimin lost the little ring he always wears. Jungkook found it in his own jacket pocket. "Where is it?" Jimin's voice cracked through the quiet apartment, sharp enough to slice the early morning stillness. The question hung in the air like smoke after a fire, thin, choking, impossible to ignore. Jungkook froze in the doorway, one hand still gripping the strap of his bag, rainwater dripping from his sleeve onto the wooden floor. Outside, thunder rolled across the grey sky, a low growl that seemed to echo the dread tightening in his chest. Jimin stood in the middle of the living room, hair disheveled, eyes wide and glassy. His fingers trembled as they hovered over the empty chain around his neck. The ring was gone. Not just any ring, the small silver band he never took off, the one he absent-mindedly twisted whenever he was nervous, the one he claimed meant nothing but guarded like it held his pulse inside it. Jungkook swallowed. His throat felt dry despite the damp air clinging to his skin. I don't know," he said, forcing the lie past his lips. The lie tasted like metal. Jimin turned away, packing. The soft padding of his bare feet against the floor sounded frantic, uneven. "I had it last night. I remember touching it before I fell asleep." Jungkook remembered too. He remembered the dim glow of the bedside lamp, the rise and fall of Jimin's breathing, the way the ring glinted faintly against his collarbone like a fragile star. He remembered reaching out, hesitating, then slipping the chain over Jimin's head with trembling fingers. He told himself it was to keep it safe. But the truth was heavier. He was afraid Jimin would lose it. Afraid Jimin would lose himself. Afraid one day Jimin would disappear from his life the way people always had, quietly, without warning, leaving behind nothing but the echo of what used to be. And so Jungkook had tucked the ring into his jacket pocket. He hadn't meant to keep it this long. A crash jolted him back to the present. Jimin had knocked over a chair, his breath coming in short bursts. "It's stupid," Jimin muttered, though his voice trembled. "It's just a ring, it's not like it matters." But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Jungkook stepped forward. "It matters to you." Jimin laughed, a hollow sound. "You don't know that." The words landed like stones between them. Jungkook felt them sink deep, stirring the sediment of unspoken things, years of almost confessions, of shared glances that lingered too long, of nights spent side by side, yet miles apart. He knew Jimin's habits, the way he bit his lip when anxious, the way he avoided mirrors on bad days, the way he hummed old melodies when he thought no one was listening. He knew the shadows behind Jimin's smiles, the exhaustion hidden beneath perfection. And he knew the ring wasn't just metal. It was an anchor. A promise Jimin never explained. "I can help you look," Jungkook offered softly. Jimin nodded, though his eyes remained distant. They searched the couch cushions, under the table, along the windowsill where raindrops streaked the glass. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and the storm outside, wet pavement, ozone, something electric in the air. As they searched, memories flickered through Jungkook's mind like scenes from an old film. The first time he saw the ring, Jimin had been laughing, sunlight catching the silver band as if it were part of him. The first time he asked about it, Jimin had shrugged, deflecting with a joke. The first time he noticed Jimin clutching it during a panic attack, the way his knuckles turned white, as if letting go would shatter him. Jungkook's fingers brushed the inside of his jacket pocket. The ring was still there, warm from his body heat. His chest tightened. He could give it back now, end the panic, end the lie. But a whisper of fear held him back. If Jimin knew, would he understand? Or would he see it as a violation, proof that Jungkook didn't trust him to hold onto the things that mattered? "Did you check the bedroom?" Jimin asked suddenly. Jungkook shook his head. "Not yet." They moved together down the narrow hallway. The floor creaked under their weight, a familiar sound that now felt ominous. In the bedroom, the sheets were tangled, the pillow still dented where Jimin's head had rested. Jimin stopped at the bedside table, staring at the lamp. "I had a dream," he murmured. "I was on a train. Everyone kept getting off, one by one, and I couldn't move. I just sat there, holding the ring, waiting for someone to come back." Jungkook's heart pounded. "Did anyone?" he asked. Jimin shook his head. Silence settled between them, thick and suffocating. Jungkook reached into his pocket. The metal brushed his fingertips, sending a shiver up his spine. He pulled his hand back, clenching it into a fist. "Coward!" "Jungkook," Jimin said quietly, not turning around. "Do you ever feel like you're easy to leave behind?" The question struck deeper than any accusation. "Yes," Jungkook whispered. Jimin finally faced him. His eyes were red-rimmed but steady, searching Jungkook's face as if trying to read a language he'd never learned. "Then you understand why I needed it." "Needed, not wanted." Jungkook nodded. His chest ached with the weight of everything unsaid. Slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the ring. The silver caught the dim light, glinting like a confession. Jimin's breath hitched. "You." "I took it," Jungkook said, voice barely audible. "Last night, you were asleep. I thought you might lose it." The storm outside intensified, rain hammering the windows like 1,000 restless thoughts. Jimin stared at the ring in Jungkook's palm, emotions flickering across his face. Shock, hurt, confusion, something softer beneath it all. "You didn't trust me," Jimin said. "I didn't trust the world," Jungkook replied. "It takes things, people, moments. I just wanted to protect something that mattered to you." The words trembled with a truth he had never dared to speak. "You matter to me." Jimin's shoulders sagged. He sank onto the edge of the bed, covering his face with his hands. For a moment, Jungkook feared he had broken something irreparable. Then Jimin laughed, a quiet, fragile sound. "You're an idiot," he said, voice thick. "You know that." Jungkook let out a shaky breath. "Yeah." Jimin reached for the ring. Their fingers brushed, a fleeting contact that sent warmth rushing through Jungkook's chest. Jimin held the ring tightly, as if reacquainting himself with its weight. "It was my father," Jimin said after a long pause. "The only thing he left behind. I wear it so I don't forget that someone once stayed." The confession settled in the room like falling snow, soft, heavy, transformative. Jungkook sat beside him. "You're not easy to leave behind," he said. "You're impossible." Jimin looked at him, eyes glistening. The storm outside began to quiet, rain softening to a gentle whisper against the glass. For the first time that morning, Jimin slipped the ring back onto its chain and fastened it around his neck. The silver rested against his skin, steady and familiar. He exhaled, a long breath that seemed to release hours, years of tension. "Next time," Jimin said, glancing sideways at Jungkook, "if you're afraid of losing me, just stay." Jungkook felt something shift inside him, like a door finally opening after being locked for too long. "I will," he said. And in the fragile calm that followed, with the scent of rain fading and the quiet hum of the apartment returning, the ring no longer felt like an anchor to the past, but a promise neither of them had to carry alone. The silence that followed should have been comforting, but instead it pressed against Jungkook's ribs like a tightening vice. Jimin stood by the window, fingers curled around the chain at his neck, the ring resting once more against his skin. Outside, the storm had weakened into a steady drizzle, the city blurred into watercolor streaks of gray and silver. Inside, the air felt heavier than before, saturated with truths that had finally been spoken, and others that still lurked, unformed, between them. "You stayed," Jimin said quietly, not turning around. "You always stay, even when I make it difficult." Jungkook leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, unsure whether he was holding himself together or keeping himself from reaching out. "You don't make it difficult," he replied. "You make it real." Jimin huffed a soft laugh. "Real is another word for messy." Messy means it matters. Jimin turned then, his gaze sharp, searching. Why do you care so much? The question landed harder than any accusation. Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it. The answer felt too large, too fragile. It wasn't one moment or one reason. It was 1,000 small things, shared meals eaten in silence that felt like peace, late-night confessions spoken into the dark, the way Jimin's presence filled spaces Jungkook hadn't realized were empty. You already know, Jungkook said finally. Jimin's jaw tightened. No, I don't, because if I did, you wouldn't look like you're about to run every time I get too close. The words ignited something volatile in the room. I'm not running, Jungkook shot back. I'm trying not to ruin what we have. A beat of silence. What do we have? Jimin demanded, stepping closer. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the strain of holding back too much for too long. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I'm clinging to someone who keeps one foot out the door. Jungkook felt heat rise in his chest. That's not fair. Neither is pretending we're just roommates, friends, whatever safe word you hide behind. The distance between them shrank to nothing. Jungkook could see the faint scar above Jimin's eyebrow, the tiny tremor in his lower lip, the way his fingers kept brushing the ring as if drawing strength from it. You think I'm hiding, Jungkook said, voice low. I think you're afraid, Jimin replied, and you'd rather lose me slowly than risk losing me all at once. The accusations struck with surgical precision. Jungkook looked away, the truth of it cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. He had spent years perfecting the art of half-steps, never fully committing, never fully retreating. It was safer that way. If you never held something too tightly, it couldn't be ripped from your hands. But Jimin had never been something he could hold halfway. You don't understand what it's like, Jungkook said, his voice rough, to watch people leave like it's nothing, to become replaceable. Jimin's expression softened, but his voice remained steady. You're not replaceable to me. The words landed like a shockwave. Jungkook's breath caught. You can't promise that. I'm not promising forever, Jimin said. I'm promising now, I'm here now. Why isn't that enough for you? Because now can vanish, Jungkook thought. Because now is fragile. Because loving someone feels like handing them the blade that could undo you. Instead, he said, because I don't know how to believe it won't disappear. Jimin's eyes glistened. Then believe me. The plea in his voice cracked something open inside Jungkook. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them hummed with everything unsaid, everything feared, everything desperately wanted. Then Jimin did something unexpected. He removed the ring. Jungkook's heart lurched. What are you doing? Jimin held the small silver band in his palm, staring at it as if weighing its gravity. You said it was an anchor, he murmured, a promise that someone stayed. He looked up, eyes fierce despite the tears gathering, but maybe I've been using it as armor, as proof that I survived being left. Jungkook stepped forward, panic flickering in his chest. You don't need proof, you're still here. Jimin shook his head. I'm tired of surviving, I want to live, and living means risking that someone might leave. He swallowed. It means risking you. The room seemed to tilt. Why would you risk me? Jungkook whispered. Jimin's laugh was soft, disbelieving, because you're already the risk. The confession hit like lightning. Jungkook felt the world narrow to the space between them, to the fragile line separating fear from surrender. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out the rain, the city, everything but Jimin. You're infuriating, Jungkook said, voice shaking. You say things like that and expect me to just, what, pretend I don't feel it too. Jimin froze. You feel it. The question was barely a breath. Jungkook ran a hand through his damp hair, packing once before stopping in front of him again. I feel it when you laugh and forget to be careful. I feel it when you fall asleep on the couch and trust me to carry you to bed. I feel it every time you look at me like I'm someone worth staying for. Jimin's lips parted, tears spilling freely now. I've been trying not to say it, Jungkook continued, voice breaking, because saying it makes it real, and real things can be lost. Jimin stepped closer until their foreheads nearly touched. So can silence. The words hung between them, trembling. Jungkook closed his eyes. The scent of rain clung to Jimin's clothes, mixed with the faint sweetness of his shampoo. He could feel Jimin's breath against his skin, warm and unsteady. I'm terrified, Jungkook admitted. Me too, Jimin whispered. For a moment, fear stood between them like a wall built from years of loss and guarded hearts. Then, slowly, Jimin reached for Jungkook's hand and pressed the ring into his palm. Hold it, Jimin said, not to keep it from me, just hold it with me. Jungkook's fingers curled around the ring, enclosing Jimin's hand within his own. The metal was cool, but Jimin's skin was warm, grounding. They stood like that, hands clasped around the small circle of silver, as if it were a fragile bridge connecting two trembling edges. The apartment was quiet now. The storm had passed, leaving behind the soft drip of water from the eaves and the distant hum of traffic returning to life. Jungkook opened his eyes. What happens now? Jimin smiled faintly, exhaustion and hope woven together in his expression. Now we stop pretending we're not already standing in the middle of something. The truth of it settled into Jungkook's bones. He didn't know what shape this something would take. He didn't know how to protect it from the unpredictable cruelty of the world. But for the first time, he realized that protecting it didn't mean holding it alone. It meant staying. Jimin took the ring back and slipped it onto the chain once more. The gesture was slow, deliberate, no longer driven by fear, but by choice. I'm still scared you'll leave, Jimin admitted. Jungkook shook his head. I'm still scared you will. They both laughed softly at the fragile symmetry of it. Outside, a pale band of sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling into the room and catching the ring at Jimin's throat. It gleamed, not like an anchor, not like armor, but like a quiet promise forged in the aftermath of a storm. And for the first time, neither of them looked away. The sunlight that had broken through the storm did not bring warmth. It exposed everything. Jungkook noticed it first in the way Jimin avoided his eyes the next morning. The apartment smelled faintly of burnt toast and overbrewed coffee, the kind of bitter scent that lingered in the back of the throat. Jimin stood at the counter, shoulders tense, stirring a mug long after the sugar had dissolved. You're going to be late, Jungkook said, watching him. Jimin didn't respond immediately. The spoon clinked against ceramic in a slow, uneven rhythm. I called in, he said finally. That alone was wrong. Jimin never called in. He worked through fevers, migraines, heartbreak, anything that threatened to slow him down. Work was structure. Work was control. Jungkook's chest tightened. Why? Jimin set the spoon down. Because if I leave right now, we'll pretend nothing happened, and I'm tired of pretending. The words settled heavily between them. Jungkook leaned against the table, arms crossed. We're not pretending. Jimin looked up sharply. No, because it feels like we stepped right up to the edge of something last night, and now you're already measuring how far you can back away without falling. The accusations strung because it wasn't entirely wrong. I'm still here, Jungkook said. Your body is, Jimin replied. Your heart's still negotiating terms. The tension in the room thickened, charged and volatile. Jungkook exhaled sharply. You think this is easy for me? I think it's honest for you to admit it isn't, Jimin shot back. But instead, you hide behind calm silence like it's a shield. Jungkook felt heat flare in his chest. And you hide behind intensity. You push until people either break or prove they won't. Jimin flinched, the reaction small but unmistakable. For a moment, regret flickered through Jungkook, but it was too late to take the words back. Maybe I do, Jimin said quietly, because the ones who leave always do it gently. They smile, they promise to call, they say nothing's wrong. His voice tightened. I'd rather you break something than lie to me. The raw honesty of it left Jungkook speechless. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing the length of the kitchen. Do you know what it's like to feel replaceable in your own life, to feel like you're just a temporary stop for people on their way to something better? Jungkook swallowed. Yes. Then why do you keep acting like I'm asking for too much? Jimin demanded. All I want is for you to stop standing halfway out the door. I'm not halfway out, Jungkook said, voice rising. I'm terrified that if I step fully in, you'll realize I'm not enough. The confession landed like a dropped glass, sharp, irreversible. Jimin stopped packing. Not enough for what? For you, Jungkook whispered. You're everything people notice. You light up rooms. You make strangers feel seen. And me, I'm just the person who stays in the background making sure the lights work. Jimin stared at him, disbelief flickering across his face. You think I want the lights? He asked. I want the person who makes them stay on. The words hit with startling force. Jungkook's breath caught, but before he could respond, a sudden knock at the door shattered the fragile moment. Both of them froze. Another knock followed, louder, insistent. Jimin frowned. Are you expecting someone? Jungkook shook his head. The knocking came again, sharp enough to rattle the frame. Something about it felt wrong, urgent, impatient, like a demand rather than a request. Jungkook moved toward the door. Jimin grabbed his wrist. Wait. Their eyes met. Fear flickered between them, unspoken but shared. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then a voice from the other side, muffled but unmistakable. Jimin, I know you're in there. Jimin's face drained of color. Jungkook's pulse spiked. Who is that? Jimin didn't answer. The voice came again, colder this time. We need to talk. Jungkook turned the handle before Jimin could stop him. The door opened to reveal a man Jungkook had never seen before, tall, impeccably dressed, his expression carved from something harder than anger. Rain clung to his coat, droplets sliding to the floor like quiet threats. His eyes went straight to Jimin. You disappeared, the man said. Jimin's grip on Jungkook's sleeve tightened. I didn't disappear, I left. The man's gaze shifted to Jungkook, assessing, dismissive. And this is why. The implication was immediate and sharp. Jungkook felt a surge of protectiveness. You don't get to speak about him like that. The man's eyebrow lifted. And you are. Someone who stays, Jungkook replied before he could stop himself. Jimin's breath hitched. The man let out a soft, humorless laugh. He said that once, he murmured. The words sliced through the room. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Who is he? Jimin's voice was barely audible. My fiancé. The world tilted. The ring at Jimin's throat suddenly felt heavier, its meaning fracturing into pieces Jungkook didn't know how to hold. You were engaged, Jungkook asked, the question hollow. Were, the man repeated, we still are. Jimin stepped forward, placing himself between them. No, we're not, I ended it. You vanished without a conversation, the man replied coldly. That's not ending it, that's running. Jungkook felt the accusation echo uncomfortably. Jimin's hands trembled. I left because I couldn't breathe, because every decision was already made for me, because loving you felt like signing a contract I didn't understand. The man's jaw tightened, and this, he gestured toward Jungkook, this is freedom. This is choice, Jimin said. The tension in the room snapped taut. Jungkook's mind raced. Engagement, promises, a life Jimin had nearly lived and walked away from, the ring his father left him, the fear of being left, the desperation to be chosen. He wasn't just stepping into something fragile. He was stepping into the wreckage of a life Jimin had refused. The man's gaze returned to Jungkook. Do you know what you're getting into? Jungkook met his eyes. No, he said honestly, but I'm not leaving. Jimin's breath shuddered. The man studied them both, something unreadable flickering in his expression, anger, hurt, maybe even reluctant understanding. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He held it out to Jimin. "You left this," he said. Jimin didn't move. After a long moment, Jungkook took the box and handed it to him. Jimin opened it slowly. Inside lay a gold band, polished, pristine, untouched by time or memory. A future that never happened. Jimin closed the box with trembling fingers. "I can't accept this." "You already did," the man said softly. Jimin shook his head. "Not anymore." The finality in his voice was unmistakable. The man exhaled, the fight draining from his posture. "Then this is goodbye," he said. No one spoke as he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the hallway until only silence remained. Jimin stood motionless, the velvet box clutched in his hand, the silver ring resting against his chest like a heartbeat. Jungkook didn't know what to say. The air felt charged with aftermath, of endings, of beginnings, of choices that could not be undone. Finally, Jimin whispered, "You should hate me." Jungkook frowned. "Why?" "For dragging you into something this complicated, for not telling you the truth sooner, for being a mess." Jungkook stepped closer. "You told me you were tired of surviving," he said. "This is what living looks like. It's complicated, it's terrifying, it's honest." Jimin looked up, tears streaking silently down his face. "You're still here." "I told you," Jungkook said gently. "I stay." Jimin's shoulders shook with a quiet sob, and this time he didn't hide it. Jungkook pulled him into an embrace, feeling the tension slowly unravel as Jimin clung to him, not as an anchor, not as armor, but as someone choosing to be held. Outside, the clouds began to part, revealing a pale stretch of blue. Inside, the gold ring remained closed in its velvet box on the table, while the silver one rested against Jimin's heart, no longer a relic of who stayed, but a testament to who chose to remain. The gold ring stayed on the table like an accusation. Jungkook noticed it every time he tried not to look. It gleamed under the afternoon light, pristine and untouched, a symbol of a life that had almost claimed Jimin and might still try to. Jimin hadn't moved it. He sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if the weight of his choices had gravity. The silver ring rested against his chest, rising and falling with each unsteady breath. "You can throw it away," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin shook his head. "It's not trash." "Then what is it?" "A reminder," Jimin replied, "of the version of me that almost disappeared." The words hung in the air, fragile and sharp. Jungkook leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Do you regret leaving him?" Jimin's laugh was hollow. "That's the worst part. I don't regret leaving. I regret how easy it would have been to stay." Jungkook frowned. "Easy doesn't mean right." "It does when you're tired," Jimin said. "When you've spent your whole life trying to be what people expect. Easy feels like mercy." The confession settled deep in Jungkook's chest. He understood that exhaustion, the kind that made surrender feel like peace. "But you didn't choose easy," Jungkook said. Jimin looked up at him, eyes rimmed red. "No, I chose terrifying." A long silence followed. The apartment felt too small for everything they were holding. Outside, the city had returned to its normal rhythm, car horns, distant voices, the hum of life continuing without them. Inside, time seemed suspended. "You should know something," Jimin said suddenly. Jungkook's stomach tightened. "That sounds dangerous." "It is," Jimin's fingers twisted together. "He wasn't the only one I almost married." Jungkook blinked. "What?" Jimin gave a bitter smile. "Not legally, but emotionally, I've spent years trying to fit into lives that didn't belong to me, different people, different expectations. Same ending, I disappear." Jungkook felt a flicker of anger. "You're not something people get to reshape." "I let them," Jimin said, "because being wanted, even for the wrong reasons, felt better than being left." The honesty was brutal. Jungkook pushed off the wall, packing once across the room. "And what am I?" he asked. "Another wrong reason." Jimin stood abruptly. No, you're the first reason that feels like mine. The words struck with startling force. Jungkook stopped packing. Then why does it feel like you're still halfway gone? Jimin's expression cracked. Because I don't know how to stay without losing myself. Every time I've tried, I've woken up one day and realized I've become someone else's idea of me. Jungkook stepped closer, voice low. I don't want an idea of you, I want you, even the parts that don't make sense. Jimin's breath hitched. You say that now, he whispered, but what happens when my fears make me cruel, when my anxiety makes me shut you out, when I start believing you'll leave and push you away first? Then we fight, Jungkook said. We argue, we say things we regret, and we stay anyway. Jimin stared at him, as if trying to decide whether hope was worth the risk. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed on the table. Both of them froze. The screen lit up with a name Jungkook didn't recognize. Jimin's face went pale. You don't have to answer, Jungkook said. Jimin swallowed. If I don't, it won't stop. He picked up the phone with trembling fingers. Hello. The voice on the other end was loud enough that Jungkook could hear the anger through the speaker. You think you can just vanish and pretend nothing happened? Jimin closed his eyes. I didn't vanish. I told you I needed space. You humiliated me, the voice snapped. Do you know what people are saying? Do you know what this does to my reputation? Jungkook's jaw tightened. This isn't about reputation, Jimin said quietly. It's about me trying to breathe. A scoff, you were fine before you met him. The implication was clear. Jungkook felt heat surge through him. He opened his mouth, but Jimin raised a hand, silently asking him not to interfere. I wasn't fine, Jimin said. I was quiet. Same thing, the voice replied coldly. Something in Jimin's expression hardened. No, it is. Silence crackled through the line. Then softer, more dangerous. You'll regret this. People like you always do. You'll realize you threw away stability for a fantasy. Jimin's grip on the phone tightened. If stability means losing myself, then yes, I threw it away. He ended the call before the response could come. The apartment fell into a ringing silence. Jungkook stepped closer. Are you okay? Jimin laughed shakily. No, but I'm clearer. He set the phone down beside the gold ring, the two objects looking like relics from a life he was actively dismantling. You didn't defend yourself, Jungkook said. I didn't need to, Jimin replied. For the first time, I wasn't trying to convince someone to stay. I was choosing to let them go. The words carried a quiet power. Jungkook studied him, the tension in his shoulders, the fear still lingering in his eyes, the fragile determination holding him upright. You're shaking, Jungkook murmured. So are you, Jimin replied. Jungkook hadn't realized it, but his hands were trembling, not from fear of the call, but from the magnitude of what was unfolding between them. This wasn't a simple confession or a fleeting moment of courage. This was demolition. Jimin walked to the table and picked up the velvet box. He turned it over in his hands, then looked at Jungkook. Open the window, he said. Jungkook hesitated. What are you doing? Trust me. Jungkook crossed the room and slid the window open. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet pavement and distant ocean salt. Jimin stood beside him, the city stretching below like an endless maze of lives and choices. He opened the box one last time, looking at the gold band with an expression that held grief, relief, and something like forgiveness. I thought this meant I'd never be alone, he said softly, but I was lonely the entire time. He closed the box. Then, without ceremony, he dropped it into the trash bin beside the window. The sound was small, final. Jungkook stared at him. Are you sure? Jimin nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. I'm done living lives that don't belong to me. The air between them shifted, lighter but more exposed. Jungkook reached out, hesitating only a second before brushing his fingers against the silver ring at Jimin's chest. "And this?" he asked. Jimin covered Jungkook's hand with his own. "This isn't about someone staying," he said. "It's about me choosing to." Their fingers intertwined, resting over the small circle of silver. Jungkook felt the truth of that moment settle deep in his bones. This wasn't rescue, it wasn't dependency. It was two people, equally afraid, choosing not to run. "I'm still scared," Jimin admitted. "Good," Jungkook said softly. "It means it matters." Jimin let out a shaky breath, then surprised him by stepping closer, so close Jungkook could feel the warmth of his body, the uneven rhythm of his breathing. "If I push you away," Jimin whispered, "don't go." Jungkook's throat tightened. "If I shut down," he replied, "don't let me disappear." Jimin nodded. The city noise rose around them, life continuing in all its chaotic indifference. But inside that small apartment, something fragile and fierce had taken root, something built not on promises of forever, but on the courage to remain in the present. Jimin rested his forehead against Jungkook, their hands still clasped over the ring. No contracts, no expectations, just a choice made again and again to stay. The night arrived without warning, swallowing the last traces of daylight and replacing them with a restless, electric darkness. Jungkook lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional hum of passing cars and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. He hadn't meant to stay out here, but sleep felt impossible in the same room where everything had shifted so violently. From the bedroom came the soft sound of movement. He closed his eyes, pretending he didn't hear it. The door creaked open anyway. "You're not asleep," Jimin said. Jungkook exhaled slowly. "Neither are you." Jimin stepped into the living room, barefoot, wrapped in an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder. His hair was damp, as if he'd run his hands through it too many times. The silver ring glinted faintly in the dim light. "Why are you out here?" Jimin asked. Jungkook sat up, running a hand over his face. "I didn't want to crowd you." Jimin frowned. "Crowd me? After everything we said today, you think I want distance?" "I think you deserve space to breathe," Jungkook replied, "without me hovering like I'm afraid you'll disappear if I blink." Jimin's expression softened, then hardened again with something more volatile. "You still think I'm going to leave?" Jungkook hesitated. "I think you're capable of it." The honesty was a spark in dry air. Jimin crossed his arms. "And you're not?" "I'm terrified I will," Jungkook admitted. "Not because I want to, because it's what I've always done when things get too real." The words lingered between them, raw and unpolished. Jimin stepped closer. "Then why are you here?" "Because you asked me to stay," Jungkook said. "And for once, I'm trying not to run from something that matters." Jimin studied him, searching for cracks in the resolve. "Trying," he repeated. "That word scares me." "It scares me too." Silence stretched, thick and charged. Jimin's gaze dropped to the couch. "Move over." Jungkook blinked. "What?" "I'm not sleeping alone tonight," Jimin said, voice steady despite the faint tremor in his hands. "If we're going to do this, whatever this is, we stop pretending we're fine apart." Jungkook's pulse spiked. "Jimin." "Don't overthink it," Jimin cut in. "Just stay." Jungkook shifted, making space. Jimin lay down beside him, their shoulders touching, the contact sending a shockwave through Jungkook's chest. The couch was too small, forcing them into an intimacy neither could ignore. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jimin whispered, "He wasn't the first person who tried to make me smaller." Jungkook turned his head. "Who was?" "My mother," Jimin said, staring at the ceiling. "She loved me, but only the version of me that made her life easier, quiet, perfect, predictable." His fingers toyed with the ring. "I learned early that love came with conditions." Jungkook swallowed. "Mine came with expiration dates." Jimin looked at him. "What do you mean?" "My dad left when I was 10, Jungkook said. No explanation, just a note on the kitchen table. My mom tried to make up for it by never letting me out of her sight, but people still left. Friends moved away. Promises faded. I stopped believing in permanent. Jimin's hand found his wrist in the dark. And yet you're here. I don't know how not to be, Jungkook admitted. The confession settled into the space between their breaths. Jimin shifted closer, their knees brushing. Do you know what scares me the most? What? That one day you'll wake up and realize loving me is exhausting. Jungkook let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. Loving you is the only thing that doesn't feel like work. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Jimin froze. You said loving. Jungkook's heart pounded. There it was, out in the open, irreversible. I did, he said. The air seemed to thin. Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. Say it again. Jungkook hesitated, fear clawing at his ribs, but beneath the fear was something steadier, a quiet certainty that silence would hurt more. I love you, he said. The words landed like thunder in a clear sky. Jimin's breath hitched, his grip on Jungkook's wrist tightened as if anchoring himself to the moment. You can't take that back. He murmured. I don't want to. Jimin turned onto his side, facing him fully now. Their faces were inches apart, breaths mingling, the space between them charged with everything they had avoided for years. I've loved you, Jimin confessed, voice trembling, since the night you stayed up with me during my first panic attack and didn't try to fix me. You just sat there and let me fall apart. Jungkook's chest ached. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you'd leave, Jimin said, and loving you silently felt safer than losing you loudly. The truth was devastating. Jungkook reached up, brushing a tear from Jimin's cheek with his thumb. We are both idiots. Jimin laughed softly through his tears, catastrophically. Their foreheads touched, a fragile point of contact that felt more intimate than anything else. Then Jimin kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, trembling, years of restraint collapsing into a single, reckless moment. Jungkook's breath caught as he kissed back, his hand tangling in Jimin's sweater, pulling him closer as if proximity could erase the years they had wasted being afraid. The kiss tasted like salt and relief. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads still pressed together. This changes everything, Jungkook whispered. It changes nothing, Jimin replied. We were already here, we just stopped pretending. Before Jungkook could respond, his phone vibrated sharply on the table. They both froze. Jungkook reached for it, frowning at the unknown number. It's late, he said. Don't answer, Jimin murmured. But the phone kept vibrating, relentless. Jungkook answered, hello. A pause. Then a voice, low and cold. You think you've won. Jungkook's spine stiffened. Who is this? You took something that wasn't yours, the voice continued. Do you really think he'll stay with you when he remembers who he was before you? Jungkook's grip tightened on the phone. He's not something to be taken. A soft laugh. You'll see, people like him don't choose chaos forever. They return to stability, to what's expected. The line went dead. Jungkook stared at the screen, his pulse roaring in his ears. Jimin's voice was barely audible. Was it him? No, Jungkook said slowly. I don't think so. Fear crept into Jimin's eyes. Then who? Jungkook didn't have an answer. The apartment felt different now, no longer a refuge, but a fragile bubble surrounded by unseen pressure. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more watchful. Jimin's fingers curled into Jungkook's shirt. Don't let them be right, he whispered. Jungkook pulled him close, holding him tightly. They don't get to decide our ending. But even as he said it, unease settled deep in his chest. Because love, he was beginning to realize, wasn't just about choosing each other. It was about what the world did when you did. The call ended, but its echo stayed. Jungkook didn't sleep. He lay awake beside Jimin, listening to the uneven rhythm of his breathing, the faint rustle of fabric whenever he shifted. The couch was too small, their bodies tangled in a way that made distance impossible. Normally, the closeness would have grounded him. Tonight, it felt like a fragile barricade against something unseen. By morning, the apartment was filled with pale light and the stale quiet of unsaid fears. Jimin woke first. Jungkook felt it in the subtle tension that returned to his body, the way his hand tightened unconsciously around Jungkook's sleeve, as if confirming he was still there. "You're staring," Jungkook murmured without opening his eyes. "I'm making sure you didn't disappear," Jimin replied. Jungkook opened his eyes then. "Not today." Jimin searched his face. "What about tomorrow?" The question wasn't hypothetical. Jungkook sat up slowly. "Tomorrow I'll still be here, and if I'm not, you have permission to hunt me down and drag me back." Jimin's lips twitched despite the shadows in his eyes. "Violence as a love language, bold." "Effective," Jungkook said. The fragile humor dissolved as quickly as it came. The memory of the phone call lingered between them like a crack in glass. Jimin spoke first. "Tell me exactly what they said." Jungkook hesitated. "It was nothing." "Don't lie to protect me," Jimin said sharply. "That's how this started, with you deciding what I could handle." The rebuke was deserved. Jungkook exhaled. "They said you'd go back to what's stable, that you don't choose chaos forever." Jimin's jaw tightened. "And you think I will?" "I think the world will try to make you," Jungkook admitted. Silence. Jimin stood abruptly, packing the length of the room. "I am so tired of people deciding what I'll become," he muttered. "My parents decided. My ex decided. Even strangers think they know what kind of life I should live." He stopped in front of Jungkook. "Do you?" Jungkook met his gaze. "No, but I know what kind of life you deserve, one where you don't have to shrink." Jimin's eyes softened, then darkened again with something more volatile. "Then stop looking like you're preparing for impact." "I'm not," Jungkook said. "You are," Jimin insisted. "You keep bracing yourself like loving me is a collision you're trying to survive." The words struck too close to the truth. Jungkook stood, closing the distance between them. "Maybe it is," he said quietly. "Maybe loving you feels like stepping into something powerful enough to break me, but I'm still here, are I?" Jimin's breath hitched. "Don't say that like it's a sacrifice." "It's not," Jungkook said. "It's a choice." The tension between them surged, electric and unsteady. Jimin's voice dropped. "Then choose me without looking for the exit." Jungkook's pulse thundered. "And you choose me without testing how much I can endure." They stood inches apart, the air charged with challenge and confession. Neither wanted to yield, not because they wanted to win, but because yielding meant trusting the other to catch what fell. "Fine," Jimin said at last, his voice trembling. "No more tests." "No more exits," Jungkook agreed. For a moment, it felt like a truce. Then Jimin's phone buzzed again. He stared at the screen, dread flooding his expression. "It's my mother." Jungkook's stomach dropped. "You don't have to answer." Jimin laughed bitterly. "If I don't, she'll call 10 more times and then show up here with questions I'm not ready to answer." He swiped to answer. "Hi, Mom." The voice on the other end was sharp even through the speaker. "I heard about the engagement." Jimin closed his eyes. "It's over." "You embarrassed him," she snapped. "Do you know how that reflects on our family?" Jungkook's fists clenched. "This isn't about the family," Jimin said. "It's about me." "It has always been about you," she replied coldly. "Your dramatics, your need to complicate perfectly good situations." Jimin's shoulders stiffened. "It wasn't good for me." "You don't know what's good for you," she said. "You never have. That's why you need guidance." Jungkook stepped closer, his presence a silent anchor. "I'm not a child," Jimin said, voice shaking. "I'm allowed to choose my life." "A life with who?" she demanded. "That boy you live with, the one you hide behind like a phase. The insult sliced through the room. Jimin's eyes flashed. He's not a phase. A pause. Then quieter, more dangerous. You're throwing everything away for a feeling. Jimin's grip on the phone tightened. No, I'm choosing honesty over comfort. Honesty is overrated, she said. Stability is what lasts. Jimin looked at Jungkook, tears gathering but not falling. Stability without love is just a cage. The line went silent. Then the call ended. Jimin lowered the phone slowly, his hands shaking. Jungkook stepped forward. You didn't deserve that. Jimin laughed weakly. I've spent my entire life trying to earn a version of love that doesn't exist. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Why is it never enough? Why am I never enough unless I fit into what they want? Jungkook knelt in front of him, pulling his hands away gently. You're more than enough. They just don't know how to love someone who refuses to disappear. Jimin's composure cracked. Tears spilled freely now, silent and unrestrained. What if loving me costs you everything? He whispered. Your peace, your future, your family. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Then it's my cost to pay. That's not romantic, Jimin said hoarsely. That's terrifying. Good, Jungkook said softly. Love should be terrifying. It means it matters. Jimin stared at him, searching for doubt. There was none. Before he could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside their apartment. Both of them froze. Another crash, closer this time, shouting, footsteps, the unmistakable sound of something breaking. Jimin's fingers tightened around Jungkook's sleeve. What is that? Jungkook stood, moving toward the door cautiously. The noise grew louder, angry voices, the slam of a fist against a wall. Then a voice rang out, slurred with rage. Open the door. Jimin's face went pale. That's. The pounding started, violent and relentless. Jungkook's heart hammered. Is it him? Jimin shook his head, panic flooding his eyes. No, he wouldn't. He's too controlled for this. The door rattled under another blow. Jimin, the voice shouted, you think you can hide? Fear crawled up Jungkook's spine. Get behind me. This is my mess, Jimin said, though he didn't move away. Another der air against the door, harder this time. Jungkook's voice was low, steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. You're not alone in it. The pounding stopped. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Then, slowly, the sound of retreating footsteps. Jungkook didn't move for several seconds, listening for any sign of return. When none came, he exhaled shakily. Jimin slid down the wall, his body trembling. It's starting, he whispered. Jungkook turned to him. What is? The consequences, Jimin said. People do like it when you refuse to play your role. They push back. They punish you. They try to scare you into returning to the script. Jungkook crouched beside him. Are you scared? Jimin nodded. Yes. Good, Jungkook said gently. It means you're doing something real. Jimin let out a shaky laugh. You and your terrifying definitions of love. Jungkook helped him to his feet, their hands clasped tightly together. The apartment no longer felt like a safe bubble. It felt like a battleground, one they hadn't chosen but refused to abandon. Jimin rested his forehead against Jungkook's shoulder. If this gets worse. It might, Jungkook admitted. Promise me you won't leave to protect yourself, Jimin whispered. Jungkook held him closer. Promise me you won't leave to protect me. Jimin nodded against his chest. Outside, the hallway fell quiet, but the silence carried a warning. Inside, two people stood in the center of the storm they had chosen, terrified, defiant, and still unwilling to let go. The hallway remained silent, but the silence no longer meant safety. Jungkook didn't let go of Jimin. They stood in the middle of the living room, breath uneven, hearts still racing from the pounding at the door. The air felt different now, charged with the awareness that their private world had been breached, that the outside had found them and was testing the locks. Jimin pulled back first, wiping his face with the sleeve of his sweater. "We can't stay like this," he said. "Like what?" Jungkook asked. "Waiting for the next knock," Jimin replied, flinching every time the floor creaks. "That's not living, that's surviving again." The word landed heavily. Jungkook glanced at the door. The wood bore faint dents from the blows, subtle but undeniable evidence. "We can leave," Jungkook said. "Pack a bag, stay somewhere else for a while." Jimin shook his head. Running would prove them right. "Staying could put you in danger," Jungkook countered. Jimin's eyes flashed. "You mean us?" The correction tightened something in Jungkook's chest. "Yes," he admitted, "us." A long silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of shared risk. Jimin walked to the window, staring out at the street below. People moved through their lives, unaware of the war unfolding in a small apartment above them. A couple laughed under a shared umbrella. A delivery driver cursed at his phone. Life continued, indifferent. "They want me to go back," Jimin said softly. "Back to the safe version of me, the agreeable son, the perfect partner, the man who smiles and says yes." Jungkook joined him at the window. "And what do you want?" Jimin turned, eyes fierce despite the lingering fear. "I want to stop apologizing for existing." The words hit like a spark to dry tinder. Jungkook's pulse quickened. "Then don't." Jimin laughed bitterly. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," Jungkook said. "It's a fight, every day, with them, with yourself, with the voice in your head that says you're easier to love when you're smaller." Jimin's gaze softened. "You know that voice too well." "I've lived with it my whole life," Jungkook replied. They stood close enough that their shoulders brushed, the contact grounding. Then Jimin said something that shifted the air again. "What if they're right?" Jungkook frowned. "About what?" "That this is chaos," Jimin said. "That loving you is choosing a harder life. Fewer doors open, more judgment, more loss." Jungkook's chest tightened. "Do you regret choosing me?" Jimin's answer was immediate. "No." The certainty in his voice stole Jungkook's breath. "But I'm scared of what it costs you," Jimin continued. "Your family, your future, the ease you could have had with someone less complicated." Jungkook let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. "You think love is supposed to be easy?" "I think it's supposed to be sustainable," Jimin said, "not a constant fight against the world." Jungkook turned to face him fully. "Then let's be honest. This isn't just us against the world. It's us against the versions of ourselves that were taught to disappear." Jimin stared at him, eyes glistening. Before he could respond, another knock came. Not violent this time. Measured, deliberate. Both of them froze. Jungkook's jaw tightened. "Stay here." "No," Jimin said, grabbing his wrist. "We face it together." The knock came again. Jungkook opened the door slowly. A woman stood in the hallway, elegant, composed, her expression unreadable. Her eyes moved past Jungkook and landed on Jimin. Jimin's breath left him in a whisper. "Mom." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her heels clicking against the floor with controlled precision. Her gaze swept the apartment, taking in the couch, the dented door, the faint disarray of a life interrupted. "This is where you've been hiding," she said. "I'm not hiding," Jimin replied, though his voice trembled. Her eyes shifted to Jungkook. "You must be the reason." Jungkook met her gaze. "He's here because he chose to be." A faint, dismissive smile touched her lips. "Choice is a luxury, not a virtue." Jimin stepped forward. "Stop." The single word carried more force than a shout. She looked at him, surprised. "You don't get to walk in here and decide what my life means," Jimin said, voice shaking but unwavering. "I'm done living for your approval." Her expression hardened. "Everything I've done has been to protect you." "From what?" Jimin demanded. From being myself. From instability, she replied sharply. From a life that will swallow you whole once the novelty fades. Jungkook felt anger flare. He's not a novelty. She turned to him, her gaze cold and precise. And you are a permanent fixture or just the rebellion he'll outgrow. The words struck deep, hitting the exact fear Jungkook had never fully voiced. Jimin saw it. He grabbed Jungkook's hand, fingers lacing tightly through his. He's not temporary, Jimin said. He's the first person who's ever stayed when I stopped pretending. The room fell silent. His mother studied their joined hands, something flickering in her eyes, anger, disbelief, perhaps a sliver of something more complicated. You think this is bravery, she said quietly. It's selfishness. You're choosing your feelings over your future. Jimin's grip tightened. For once, my future includes my feelings. Her composure cracked, just for a second. You will regret this. Maybe, Jimin said, but the regret will be mine. The finality in his voice settled like a verdict. She looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for the obedient son she had known. He didn't look away. Finally, she turned toward the door. I hope he's worth it, she said without looking back. Jimin's voice was steady, so do I. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The apartment felt impossibly quiet. Jungkook released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Are you okay? Jimin didn't answer. He was staring at their hands, still intertwined, as if the contact itself were proof that he hadn't imagined the last hour. I've never said no to her before, he whispered. Jungkook squeezed his fingers. How does it feel? Jimin's laugh was shaky, disbelieving, like I just stepped off a cliff and realized I'm still standing. Emotion surged through Jungkook's chest. You didn't fall because you're not alone. Jimin looked up at him, tears spilling freely now, not from fear, but from the overwhelming release of a lifetime of restraint. They're all going to hate me, he said. Some will, Jungkook admitted. Some will learn, and some were never really on your side to begin with. Jimin nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. And you, he asked, what if your family? They'll have opinions, Jungkook said. They always do, but I'm done letting fear decide who I love. The words hung in the air, solid and unshakable. Jimin stepped closer, their foreheads touching once more. This is the part where we either become stronger or everything falls apart. Jungkook's voice was steady. Then we build something that doesn't depend on their approval. Jimin's fingers brushed the silver ring at his chest. This used to mean someone stayed, he said. Now it means I did. Jungkook covered his hand, and I will. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet revolution inside a small apartment. Inside, two people stood amid the aftermath of confrontation and confession, stripped of illusions, but still holding on. Not because it was easy. Not because it was safe. But because, for the first time, leaving felt more frightening than staying. The rain had not stopped since dawn, turning the city into a blur of grey glass and trembling reflections. Inside the dimly lit safe house, the air felt heavier than the storm outside, thick with suspicion and words no one dared to say first. Elena stood by the shattered window, her fingers trembling against the cold metal frame, while Marcus paced behind her like a caged animal, every step echoing with restrained fury. You lied to me, Marcus finally said, his voice low but cutting. Not just once, every step of the way. Elena didn't turn. If I hadn't, you would be dead. That's not your choice to make. It became my choice the moment you trusted the wrong people, she snapped, spinning around. Her eyes were red, but not from tears, from exhaustion, from carrying secrets that had begun to rot inside her. You think this is about betrayal, this is about survival. A bitter laugh escaped him. Survival? You call handing over the coordinates survival? You delivered us into a massacre. Her face hardened. I changed the coordinates. I saved the ones who mattered. The ones who mattered to you, he shot back. The room fell silent. the kind of silence that hums with the memory of gunfire. In the corner, Daniel shifted uneasily, his bandaged arm pressed against his chest. He had been quiet too long, watching the two people he once trusted most tear each other apart. "You're both missing the point," Daniel said hoarsely. "Someone inside fed them the original intel. Elena couldn't have known." Marcus turned sharply. "And you're defending her now?" "I'm defending the truth," Daniel replied, "because if we keep tearing into each other, the real traitor walks free." The word traitor lingered in the air like smoke. Elena's gaze flickered toward the locked door. "He's already gone." Marcus frowned. "What are you talking about?" She swallowed. "I checked the comm logs before you woke up. A transmission went out at 03:17, encrypted. Not mine, not yours." Daniel was unconscious. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It came from the command unit." Marcus froze. "That's impossible. That unit was destroyed." "That's what we were told," she replied. Daniel's breathing quickened. If command is still active, then the operation was never cancelled. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, but beneath it came another sound: engines. Multiple, approaching fast. Marcus moved to the table, grabbing the rifle with a familiarity that felt like muscle memory and regret intertwined. "How long?" "Minutes," Elena said. "Maybe less." Daniel struggled to stand. "We can't outrun them in this state." Marcus looked at Elena, conflict tearing across his face. "You said you saved the ones who mattered. Was I one of them?" Her lips parted, but the answer seemed to cost her more than any wound. "You were the only one I couldn't afford to lose." The confession hit harder than the thunder outside. For a moment, the anger drained from his eyes, replaced by something more dangerous: hope. Then the first bullet shattered the front door. Wood splintered inward, shouts erupted, boots pounded against concrete. "Back exit," Daniel shouted. "There is no back exit," Elena said quietly. Marcus stared at her. "What?" "I sealed it 2 nights ago," she admitted. "Protocol, no escape routes for compromised sites." "Then we are trapped," Daniel whispered. Elena's expression shifted, fear giving way to resolve. "No, we are cornered. That's different." The second wave of gunfire tore through the walls. Dust filled the air. Marcus grabbed Elena's wrist. "If we make it out of this, there are no more secrets." She met his gaze, something fierce igniting behind her exhaustion. "If we make it out, you'll finally understand why there had to be." The lights flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by lightning flashing through the broken window. In that stark white glow, Marcus saw movement behind Elena, a shadow where no shadow should be. A voice emerged from the darkness, calm and familiar. "You were never meant to survive this phase." Elena's face drained of color. "No, you're dead." The figure stepped into the lightning's glare, revealing a man they had buried months ago. Commander Hales smiled. That was the point. Marcus felt the world tilt, every certainty collapsing at once. The mission, the betrayal, the massacre, it had all been a design, a test, a purge, and they were the final variables. Outside, the engines roared closer. Inside, 3 survivors stood frozen between rage, shock, and a truth too monstrous to absorb. Elena's voice broke the silence, raw and defiant. "You turned us against each other." Hale tilted his head. "No, I revealed who you truly are under pressure." Marcus raised the rifle, hands shaking. "Then let me show you who I am now." The trigger tightened, the storm raged, and in that single suspended heartbeat, loyalty, love, and vengeance collided, promising that whatever happened next would leave none of them unchanged. The gunshot did not sound as loud as Marcus had imagined. It cracked through the darkness like a final verdict, sharp and irreversible. For a fraction of a second, no one moved. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Commander Hale staggered back, surprise flickering across his face, not fear, not pain, but disbelief. A dark bloom spread across his chest, soaking into the fabric of the uniform he had once worn with pride. He looked down at the wound, then back up at Marcus, as though trying to reconcile the outcome with the certainty he had always carried. "You were predictable," Hale murmured, his voice weakening, "but necessary." Marcus kept the rifle trained on him, even as his hands trembled. "You don't get to turn people into experiments and call it necessity." Hale gave a faint, almost sympathetic smile. "History will." His knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor, the echo of his fall swallowed by the thunder that crashed overhead. For a long moment, the only sound in the safe house was the rain hammering against the broken windows and the ragged breathing of those still alive. Daniel sank against the wall, staring at Hale's motionless body. Was that it?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Was he really the architect of all this?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She stepped forward cautiously, as if the man on the floor might still rise, might still have one more revelation to unleash. She knelt beside him, fingers hovering over his pulse point before finally making contact. Nothing. Her shoulders sagged, the tension draining out of her in a single, fragile exhale. "It's over," she whispered, though the words sounded foreign, almost dangerous in their hope. Another burst of gunfire erupted outside, reminding them that Hale's death had not ended the immediate threat. Marcus lowered the rifle slowly, his gaze shifting to Elena. The anger that had fueled him was gone, replaced by a weary clarity. "You sealed the exits," he said quietly. "Yes." "You lied." "Yes." He studied her face, searching for the layers he had missed, the burdens she had carried alone. "And you still stayed." Her eyes shimmered, but her voice held steady, "because leaving would have meant losing you anyway." Daniel let out a strained laugh that turned into a cough. "If this is reconciliation, can we do it somewhere that isn't about to collapse on us?" The absurdity of it broke something open between them. Marcus let out a breath that was almost a laugh, the first hint of warmth in a night carved by betrayal. He moved to Daniel's side, helping him to his feet, then looked back at Elena. "No more protocols," he said. "No more secrets." She nodded. "No more." The three of them moved toward the shattered window, the only path left. The drop to the alley below was dangerous but survivable, unlike staying. Rain lashed their faces as they climbed out, one by one, into the storm that had borne witness to their unraveling. Behind them, the safe house lights flickered back to life for a brief, ghostly moment, illuminating Hale's body sprawled on the floor. Then the power died for good, and the building fell into darkness. They landed hard in the alley, boots splashing through water that had already begun to wash away the night's bloodshed. Sirens wailed in the distance, whether for them or for the chaos unfolding across the city, none of them could tell. Marcus looked up at the sky, rain streaming down his face like a baptism he had never asked for. What now? Elena followed his gaze, her expression no longer haunted but resolute. "Now we live with what we know, and we make sure no one ever turns people into pawns again." Daniel leaned against the wall, exhausted but alive. "That sounds like the start of another war." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but this time we choose the battlefield." For the first time since the storm began, the thunder softened, rolling away into the distance. Dawn's first pale light crept between the clouds, fragile and uncertain, but real. They walked out of the alley together, not as operatives, not as pieces on a board, but as survivors bound by truth, loss, and a future unwritten. The city stretched before them, scarred yet waking, and in its quiet, trembling light lay the promise that even after betrayal and fire, something human could still endure. And this time, no one was pulling the strings.